Now, that's one person's story, but it is worth investigating the stories of all the people making the trek from the U.S. border. What's driving them, and how should we approach helping them moving forward? I spoke with a professor of global affairs and politics at Farmingdale State College today to try to answer those questions and more. The Biden administration, the federal government has said we are making it clear to migrants in these other countries that you cannot come here this way, but that doesn't really seem to be working. Do we know how that message gets to people in these countries?
It's quite difficult. It also depends on the relationship that the United States does have with these countries. We do know that, the United States does work with Nicaragua, they work with Cuba and Haiti under certain immigration policies where they do allow a certain amount of people into the United States as long as they, apply through the legal channels. So there are working relationships with them when it comes to immigration because they realize that this is not something that they can handle on their own. They do have to be in partnership with other countries where an influx of these migrants are coming from. In terms of the messaging getting out to those who live in those respective countries, it may be quite difficult. And to be frank, if someone is seeking asylum, and rightfully so, they have the right to do so. If they're experiencing any forms of persecution, there's no amount of what we call, marketing when it comes to immigration policies or any forms of information on deterrence that will really stop them in utilizing all channels to escape the situation that they're facing.
Professor, let's explain to people what is going on in these countries. I mean, some people are living in very dire conditions. Not only may they be suffering persecution and being threatened by gangs, but the conditions in these countries are very, very bad. And, there's a lot of people that will say perhaps we need to work on helping those countries raise themselves up. But I think it helps people to understand, whether you agree with it or not, why people are coming here.
Yes, you have to understand that people don't leave their homes just to leave their homes and where they live, and don't risk the journey to travel from their country to seek greener pastures. Some of the things that they are facing are socioeconomic issues. They're violent issues, increase of violence on the land. There are issues that have to do with lack of employment. People cannot fend for their families or for themselves. There can be religious persecution, fear for safety for themselves or for their children due to tribe, due to affiliation, for a number of different factors as to why people leave. People have the right to leave. But the question that always comes into matter is that, look, if you are seeking asylum, there is still a fear-based test that you must undergo where people have to determine that is your story or the reason why you are leaving, is it sufficient enough for you to be granted access into the country? And even if we look at the Mediterranean Sea, where a lot of Africans who are fleeing from that area in certain countries, right, risking their lives to travel across the Mediterranean Sea, knowing that this is a life or death situation. So we always have to put into context that when it comes to, immigration policy, you're at the crossroads of how do we protect our borders? How do we protect those who live within the country who are legally and lawfully here? But then how do you humanize this policy, right? How do you soften the approach? How do you have an empathetic response to a national security issue, right? Even to an economic issue, because again, many states are pushing back and saying, well, the burden can't just be on me, right? We have a population that we have to tend to and take care of legally. And then you have those who have yet to establish a legal status in the country, and we are being stretched by the seams, socioeconomic, socially, economic wise. So we understand both sides of the coin, but at the same time, we have to ensure that people's human rights are not violated in the process.
Do you think that we use those terms interchangeably right now, asylum seeker and migrant? Do you think we need to do a better job of how we use those terms?
We do have to be careful with terminology because, many terms can have various motives or intentions, may have negative connotations to it. So we try to use words that are general, but go to the point of classifying who they are, right? Without disrespecting or dehumanizing who the individual is, right? So I think that's really important and to put into context. When we say asylum seekers, we are basically saying those who are seeking asylum into the United States. Some have went through the process already, some have not. Some are at the point of entry and are going to declare themselves asylum seekers and are going to go through that process. So, and they declare themselves asylum seekers because it's the legal channel to get into the United States in that aspect.
Anything else you think people should know?
I think we are at a time where, this is immigration policy needs to have some form of reforms, right? We haven't had that much reforms in many years. There's always been that debate and, argument on both sides as to what is the best policies that need to be reformed. What are the new things that need to be put into place to address the growing issue of migration and immigration? And as time goes on and as things change, we start to see that we're dealing with various issues that affect countries around the world. And we have a local minded way of looking at issues. But when we have a global aspect, you'll realize that some of the things that are happening in other countries directly affect the United States. And that is why you'll see an increase of migrants coming from certain countries, because maybe there's an issue on ground that is going there that is forcing them to leave. And so I think it's always important for people to have that in their perspective and be able to know the backstory and understand the countries in which they're coming from. And that gives, I think, a better context of it as to why they're coming.
And stay with Eyewitness News for continuing coverage of this developing story, the expiration of Title 42. You can also get updates online at ABC7NY.